Anyways, Hangzhou Spark. Largely staying the same, adding Coldest and M1KA to their support lineup. They are at 10 players on the season, but largely not changing a whole lot. They finished last season third, fourth?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah, they finished really high, but we're dropping them down here. Ninth. And we should probably talk about that. And I think the first thing we should talk about is Coldest and M1KA. So Coldest and M1KA come in here as we kind of discussed earlier, arguably, if not absolutely, the best support duo in China. This is a team, though, that outside of Guxue, completely Korean players.
Yep.
Okay.
Yeah.
So adding 2 new Chinese players to the roster here. Joe, you seem to think that despite Coldest being regarded as the best carry support in China, that he may not see as much play in Overwatch League, and we may actually just see Hangzhou stick with IDK and BB instead.
Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting, and I want to hear more about your thoughts on that.
I think there's a lot to be said about Coldest. I think he is very talented. But you're plugging a Chinese player into a mostly Korean speaking roster. That's like, skeptic eyebrow raise number one. You're then taking Bebe out, who's obviously played with this team for a long time, has also played with a lot of these players like Godsby for, extended amounts of time. You're removing that synergy away from the roster, right? You're inserting Coldest, who has a very distinct playstyle, who demands a lots of resources, kind of not needs to be babysat, but, he needs to be planned with in mind, right? You can't just throw him in and expect him to work, because you're going to probably see him die a lot if you do that. He's going to walk forward. He's going to flank. He's going to trans for safety and not for the team. Or lamp, depending on what heroes are being played at the moment, or fade off cooldown a little bit too much and be abused. He wants to do damage. With all of that in mind, I do have my hesitations on saying that Coldest is going to see a ton of stage time, especially at the start. Later on in the season, come playoffs, there's a great chance that he could see play. I think just in terms of talent, I would say that he's probably more talented than Bebe. I think mechanically he's better than Bebe. I think Bebe's not bad. I think he's quite serviceable. But I don't see IDK moving. I like M1KA. But if it's a battle, if we're going to think binary about this, I really have a hard time seeing IDK off this roster. But there again, with the advent of travel and yada, 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 roster depth is very important. Having more supports than not is a good thing. So having Coldest and M1KA is a good thing. I just don't know about Coldest.
Here's an observation I made in my future foretelling.
Okay, you read the tea leaves?
How my tea leaf said that Sebi Olby would be washed somewhere in season 1, and I had that as a topic with Sideshow as like to refute this. That actually ended up being a season too early. Now, when Godsby came in, I said that kid is washed. I think this kid is washed this season.
I think he's not great. Yeah, so to be fair, to defend him ever so slightly, I think he's going to benefit a whole lot more from being out of GOATs. I think he's going to be a role player, just like he was in playoffs. He's going to shadow step in and immediately wraith out to try and bait out as much resources as he can. He'll do fine. Worst case scenario, he feeds, but I think he's a role player. He's like an Yiska type person. He seems to be a pretty vocal member, seems to be pretty important to the way that this roster has been built. Wasn't subbed out at all last season, even though his Zarya was hot poo-poo. I don't think he's going to be great, but I think he'll do okay. He'll be a role player. He'll be a workhorse. He benefits a lot from being out of GOATs. I'll tell you that.
Okay, so like hint, hint. I don't think his backup is also that great.
No,
Like-
his DPS is pretty. That's the downfall of this team is the DPS line. The DPS is not great. They're flex DPS in general. Whether it's Adora, whether it's Sashin, who didn't really see a ton of playtime last year, and his label is a flex, which is kind of true. Did play a lot of Devo, but in the past is a projectile.
Yeah.
Not great. Not great. Again, workhorses. If you look at Bazzi on Doomfist, wasn't great.
Yeah.
All serviceable. Tank line, super sick. Gusha, great. Rhea, great. I'd like to see a little bit more depth there. I'd like to see a standout DPS player signed to this roster because they could be very, very good. This roster in the midseason, if they make just a couple of moves, make a trade here and there, you got a lot of supports. You might want to trade.
That's the hint, Joe. Though I've heard they've signed a DPS player, and I'm not convinced, dude.
Yeah, that one I'm not sure on either. Well, we'll have to see. But I think midseason, you've got some depth here to play around with as a resource. I think you can make some trades. I think you could get a pretty sick DPS on this roster and do very well. So,
yeah, I think
this
You guys are
area.
ridiculous about Godsby.
No, Godspeed's
You
cool.
guys are
Godspeed.
dumb.
just very quick.
You guys are just
Sashin, I
dumb.
think, could be a hydration type of player for the Spark next season, as in like he flexes onto tank roles instead.
Yeah.
I think that's maybe the case. If like nobody, it's weird that we don't hear that much from that entire front much at all, right? So, but yeah, like if that's I assume that because I've heard that another DPS player is coming in. That's 5 DPS players.
Yeah.
That's Outlaws in a nutshell.
Yeah.
Someone's got to move, dude. Like, yeah, we'll see.
I don't think they sell their DPS. If anything, they probably move them down 2-way because they're not going to see a bunch of playtime. And even then, they don't have very many like hyper specific players. Like Adora's kind of just again a workhorse. Sashin again is role flexible, but is that super valuable? Bazzi. He has some widow. He has some widow to him. If anything, I know Broy loves to talk about the potato chips, but if we could get him to play flex support, I think that would be great. But I don't see that happening. I think they need a very specific type of player. I think they need a true like flex projectile DPS. I don't think you need like a colorless flex type player that can play a whole bunch of different things and do them all very well. That's going to cost you a lot of money. I don't think that that's feasible for Spark at the moment, but they have a lot of power in tank. They have a lot of power at support. Godsby's like, okay. He's always been just okay, whether he was playing with Time Boy and he was just being X6 Gaming's literal bitch. Like, I mean, he was playing Pharah. They had a tracer bot and Godsby was on projectile. He did fine, but he's always been the guy who's like, oh, I'll play that. No, it's totally fine. You want to play tracer? Totally cool. I'll play. Oh, Zarya. I can play Zarya. Not really though. And he's the role player of this team. He does okay for himself, but he's not like some standout player. If you're going to see a widow, it's going to be Bazzi. Godsby's not great.
No.
Not great. I like Godsby. I just don't think he's like some sort of
Shut
killer
up.
DPS.
Don't backtrack it. Own it. Do the Yiska thing. Double down on it.
It's fine. Like finally, Joe is on my side because he's been a bit of a Godsby fanboy for the longest time.
Yeah,
so.
no. I've thought he's very flexible, and then Zarya hit, and I'm like, okay, Godsby, you're a little bit washing
to the washing machine with me.
Oh man, I can't.
He's been laundryfied. Somebody call Clorox.
I just disagree.
John wants to hot model and
I'm saying
washed.
You need to sell the stonks, boys. This is not the year. He'll do okay.
Who the hell are the top 8 if the Glads and Spark aren't? You're about to find out, sir.
You're about to find out next. Well,